Hey y'all, welcome to the Clan Hernandez podcast. There are literally thousands of other things you could be listening to right now, so thank you for choosing to spend your time with us. Our hope is that as you hear our conversations and stories, that we can provide some good laughs, encouragement, tips for navigating certain difficulties in life, and possibly even new perspectives on God the Father. We love y'all. Let's jump in.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Clan Hernandez podcast. We're thankful that you returned after last week's emotional episode. Today we're going to talk about something a little bit heavy. We're going to talk about some father wounds. I know for both of us this is kind of a hard topic, but it's necessary for us to talk about our stories, I think. And so we want to preface by saying that Nate and I both now have really good relationships with our dads. Much better.
Yeah, much better.
But we think it's important to tell our stories.
Yeah, and it's not, we're not telling our, these stories about our fathers and, just the backstories of that stuff, but we're not telling it to bring shame to them. We're not telling it to, make people feel a certain way about them either. I just think that, we've encountered a lot of people in our life, a lot of friends and family even that have gone through similar things.
Yeah.
And so it's wild to me that some of my closest friends in life, have dealt with very similar stories. And so I just think that we have something to offer in that area, even if it's just our story and just kind of how things have progressed,
But I feel like it's redemptive stories.
Sure.
So I'm going to let you start by telling your childhood trauma. I'm just kidding.
That's hilarious. I ain't going to trauma dump on you guys.
No, not at all.
Man.
I told you last time in the last podcast that you were a happy accident.
Yeah.
So let's just start right there.
Yeah, man. Yeah. I'm pretty nervous, just, talking about this, it doesn't come up very often, but it definitely has come up, just internally more since,
Both of us, since we've had kids.
And, it came up a little bit before we had our kids. And then I know that when I was in, I just graduated high school and there was just that season of like, just kind of my upbringing was really, weighing heavy on me. And so I've had different seasons where it's impacted me differently. But most of my life, my father wounds, I've kind of just been not on the back burner per se, but it's almost like I've just kind of.
You've coasted on with them.
Yeah.
Same.
And so,
yeah.
But yeah, so just, I guess where things started with me, like you said, I was a happy accident. Wasn't necessarily planned, Mama was young. She met a guy that she was working with, at a denim factory. I want to say jean factory.
Oh, I remember.
In El Paso, and so they hit it off. They liked each other. She was going to church at this time. She had just gotten saved, but there were just, she was a young believer. So she was
just gotten saved.
Yeah, she'd just gotten saved, and so still working through, her salvation, I guess you can say that.
Sanctification.
And yes, the sanctification process, right? Just learning. And so anyway, she meets this guy, they start dating, talking, whatever. And next thing you know,
there's little Nate.
She's pregnant. And she's the youngest of all her brothers and sisters. And so, man, they just surrounded her with love. And,
thank God for them.
And as you guys probably heard in our last episode, my aunts, they got pregnant really young too. And, my mom had a really, really hard upbringing. My grandmother, she's schizophrenic, like severely schizophrenic. When she's on her meds, she's more or less pretty fine, but
Yeah.
that's a very questionable when she's on.
Yeah. So
the
I've never
meds.
met her.
And
I thought
if
you were
I'm
gonna say
being
I've
honest,
never met her, and I was like,
no, you haven't met
you've
her.
never met her.
and to be honest, because of just how bad her schizophrenia is, I just haven't really made that an effort to try to introduce you.
Yeah.
There's just a lot, right? And there's a lot my mom went through, and she, her dad left the marriage when she was really young, and there's just a lot there. She used to
Pretty
have
much
to
raised herself. Your mom did.
Well, yeah, as the youngest, yeah, she kind of had to raise herself, but it was her brothers and sisters that kind of helped raise her. But man, like she tells me all the time that she had to cook outside. They had to build a fire outside to go to cook their food, and because her mom was always out, and my grandmother, she was always out partying and just doing God knows what, being with God knows who. And she talks about having all these guys in and out of the house, all
Your mom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not my mom.
Your
having
mom
guys
talks about your grandmother.
talks about remembering all these guys coming in and out of the house, and she used to roll my grandma's joints and
I could never imagine Diane Hernandez.
Yeah, it's pretty
Little
wild.
saint.
My mama, OG, rolling them joints, y'all. Let's
I
go.
cannot imagine.
Fat stubbies. Let's go.
So,
I'm kidding.
So
But yeah, that's a lot of
that's
where she came. Yeah, that's her background, and so
I never
she got
would've known
saved
that
as a young woman. She was like
in her
19
20s or something.
18 or 19 when she got saved, and then anyway, she got pregnant with me, and
your dad,
so she
your
told
biological father.
She told my biological father that, like, hey man, like we need to stop like messing around, kind of thing. Like it was like she's trying to right the relationship, and right her walk with the Lord,
because it's like you think this man's going to be in your life forever now because you have a baby.
I don't think that was so for her. It wasn't so much that I think she hoped, and so she told him.
She told him
according to her story, she tells me that she gave him kind of an ultimatum, like hey, like I really want you to be part of our son's life, or our baby's life. I don't know if she knew what I was at that point, but I want you to go to church with me.
Like, we're gonna raise this baby right.
Yeah, and I want to do this relationship right because we haven't been right, kind of thing, and come to church with me, and you can be part of your son's life. And then according to the story, I guess the shortened version of it, I guess, is just that he didn't want that. And growing up, that was the story that I heard, and that was what my mom told me, as a little boy, like, try to present that story as best as a young boy could comprehend. Right.
Yeah.
And so that's the way it was told to me pretty much my whole life. And I remember I was fine with it. I was fine with that story because I would ask my mom all the time, like, am I ever going to have a dad? I remember like driving around and, man.
It's hard to think about that as parents now. Like,
Yeah.
I would never want our girls will never say that. But just imagining, us driving by and Bella feeling that way,
Yeah. I remember as a kid, there would be like different like billboards and paintings and stuff like on the highways and stuff. And I remember as a kid for years, imagining these faces of these men on these billboards, imagining them as my dad. And I would literally ask my mom, like, is that my dad? Is that? No, that's not your dad. Am I ever going to have a dad? She's like, and I remember she would tell me, she'd be like, well, maybe one day, ask Jesus. Ask Jesus, do you want a dad? And I was like, yeah.
She's probably like, yeah, I want a husband too. Thanks.
She was, not just for the relational aspect, but for the financial help and just all of that.
As a mom, I can't imagine. Single
mama.
moms deserve everything.
100%.
It's exhausting.
Hooray for the single mamas.
Yeah.
And so I just remember growing up as a little boy, imagining what my dad would be like.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what that looked like per se, but I just knew that there was something missing. And I imagined that being a good thing.
Yeah.
It was a good thing, and I didn't have it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'd pray about it as a little boy, and shortly after, she met a guy at the church she was going to, and she ended up marrying that guy, and he's my stepdad.
Mm-hmm.
And to this day they're still married. And he had a little boy in a previous marriage.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say they had just gone through a divorce, and the little boy's name is Matthew. So for those of y'all that know me and
Matt.
my brother, that's Matt. And so I think he had just turned 2 or 3, and I had just turned 5. And so it was for a few years, it was just me and my mom.
Mm-hmm.
And it was long enough that I remember all of it.
Mm-hmm.
And we grew up, I remember growing up in like a half trailer.
Yeah.
It wasn't even like full-size trailer. It was like a little half trailer. Didn't have any like inside doors, like to rooms and stuff. It was just
it's like a lot.
one bedroom.
Loft,
yeah, I was like
right?
I was like one bedroom. That bedroom had a hallway that led you into the kitchen area, and then that led you into the little living room, and that was it. Like it had a little restroom in there, but there was no doors to, and like the restroom probably had a door, but that was about it.
Yeah.
It was a half little trailer. Like we lived very humbly, we were on WIC and all that stuff. And I just, but life was good. Life was good as a little boy. I had my mama, I had everything. I had her comfort and the security that she provided, and the love that she provided. And life was, as a kid, I didn't feel like I was lacking anything per se, but although I wanted a dad, I didn't feel like I was lacking per se.
Mm-hmm.
Like to me, we had everything, And then she met my stepdad, Matthew's dad, and they married. But he just had trauma from his past marriage, and there was some stuff that happened there, and I think it triggered just a lot of anger issues.
Yeah, a lot of.
And again, I don't say that to shame him or anything like that.
He's come so
he's
far.
come so far.
Like when Nate told me these stories, and I had met your dad, your stepdad, I remember thinking, "There's no way."
Yeah,
like I don't believe that.
People who meet him today, like,
He's changed.
they would never
so
imagine
much.
that.
Yeah. Mm-mm.
They would never imagine. Anytime I've had to tell my story or little parts of my story to people who have at least met him once before, they're like, "Whoa, I would just never imagine."
Mm-hmm.
Because he's come such a long way.
Yeah.
And so, but I just remember as a little boy, I finally get this dad. And I remember my mom telling me, like, Jesus answered your prayer. You're going to get a daddy. And with that, I'd get a brother.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was a happy moment. And I remember that being pretty exciting. And, but trauma, man.
Yeah.
Trauma is not something that can go undealt.
Yeah. You have to work through it.
You got to work through it. And you can't just allow the machismo and the pride of being a man and, just sucking it up to keep your trauma where it's at.
Mm-hmm.
And he is a Christian man, was a Christian man. They met at church, a very spirit-filled church. Now, it was a pretty legalistic Pentecostal church, so they ended up leaving that church, years later. But it was still a spirit-filled, church. And my mama loved the Lord. To this day is one of the strongest, followers of Jesus that I know. And so she met him there, and I guess the thought was, well, I met him in church. It must be okay.
Yeah.
And I even remember my stepdad saying one time recently, like, I think I don't remember who he was talking to, but he might have been talking to my sisters.
Yeah.
And he was saying, yes, all you got to do is meet him in church. Find him in church. And I'm like, and that's it. And that's all that matters. And I look at him, I'm like, Dad, what are you talking about? Meeting someone in church isn't the end all. Like, oh, they're going to be great people.
Yeah.
there's there's so much more to a relationship than just, oh, we met at church, they're believers.
Yeah.
You don't know where they're at in their walk. You don't know where they're at with their traumas. You don't know, what your married life is going to be. You don't know what your home life is going to be. You don't know what kind of environment they're going to create because they haven't worked through their stuff.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that's where that was at. He had some traumas and just a lot of anger issues. Mm-hmm. And he tells me, through the years, he tells me that, that his dad didn't really ever spend a whole lot of time with him or connect with him. It was, he taught him some things that, he taught him some lessons and stuff like that. But it was never he said that he didn't really have a good relationship with his dad in that aspect, that there was like deep connection and, sitting down and talking and stuff like that. It was very much that's my dad. That's my son, do this. I'm teaching you things.
Yeah.
And that's part of being a dad, right? Teaching your
There wasn't
your
the
children.
emotional connection.
There was no, it was just that the connection wasn't there. So he didn't know how to be a dad either.
Yeah.
He did his best.
Yeah.
With what he knew. And it took me a long time to get
to that headspace.
Of what I just said. That he tried his best. Because for a long time, I thought I hated the guy.
Yeah, I understand.
His anger issues at home was opposite of what I wanted as a little boy. I would look around at all my friends and I'd see that they had their dads, and I'd look at my cousins and
You wanted what they had. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd look at my uncles and the way that they would love their kids and man.
Yeah. And I think with you, as someone who has walked with you through this for a while, it was almost like it hurts the first time when your biological father doesn't want you, right?
But I never even processed that as a kid yet. It was until later,
But then you get a second dad. It's almost like, okay, now I have a second chance for someone to love me.
And for me, it was
for me.
Yeah, for me, it was like it was like a first chance.
For
it was,
sure. But it was like being rejected twice, being unlovable. I think.
Yeah, hindsight as I'm looking at it, back, as an adult, yeah. But it's just, man, I remember just coming home most days, and if he wasn't there, it was a good day.
Yeah.
If just because of the way that he would allow stress and the way the house had to be, very much he's very much like the typical just macho kind of Latino dad, you know. Mama stays at home. All right. I expect the house to be clean. Whenever I get home, I want there to be dinner. Son, I'm home. Come take my shoes off. Untie my shoes. Take my socks off.
Why don't you do that for me?
And it wasn't like he didn't do that stuff in a
nasty
you have
way.
to do it, but it was, part of it. Dad's tired. Go help dad take his shoes off. He would even ask me to take his wallet out of his back pocket, and I would take my wallet. As I would take his wallet out of his back pocket, because he had, he'd have a badge in his back pocket and stuff. Anyway, I probably shouldn't have said that, but
That's fine.
it was a thick wallet, and so I'd reach his back pocket and he'd fart on my hand and stuff, just being playful, right?
That's
that's what I'm saying.
Stuff.
There was some he wasn't ever doing that stuff out of being ugly, but I just remember as a kid, man, when he would get angry, and this is, I would imagine most dads, right, when they get angry, I don't know, his was to another level.
Yeah.
Never was physically or sexually, no major abuse, nothing like that, but there were times where in his anger, the way he would handle us and the way he would discipline us was overkill. I remember, there were a few times where, it drew blood, and just the way
And you got the
out
brunt
of anger.
of it.
And I would get the brunt of it. And the way that I kind of always saw it was he loves his son. He loved my mom. Loved my mom.
Still loves you.
And yeah, to this day, still loves her, right? And I always just saw that I was a package deal.
If he wanted Diane, he had to have
He
you.
had to have me as part of the package.
There was no like returns.
No.
No return policy.
And so a lot of the times it's just the way that he was pretty much always angry.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the Hulk in that scene. He's like, "Oh, that's the thing, Tony Stark, like, I'm always angry." And then he just turns right into the Hulk, right? And my dad's like default state growing up was just angry.
Yeah.
He wasn't a happy guy to be around. If dad got home, the good day's over.
Yeah.
My mom had to, tidy up, and dad's here. She would, hear the horn, and she, all right, guys, like, pick up your stuff. Hurry, let's go. Kind of, it was very much like when dad got home, things had to just be
just right.
lined
Almost
up,
like walking on eggshells, probably.
And man, I mean, the little things would just tip him off, and I remember, like, even because we still didn't have a lot of money, right? He worked a couple jobs, but we just didn't have a ton of money. Better than, single mom.
Yeah.
But and so I remember one time I lost like, there were a couple times actually where I would like lose something.
What,
like I would lose a belt
you
or
lost something?
Yeah.
What? No, not Nathan.
I misplaced something. It's so out of character.
Out of character.
Yeah, I misplaced something, and I want to say one of them was a belt or something like that. And at the time, like, it's like they bought me that belt, and that was a sacrifice.
Yeah.
And to some degree, it wasn't something that we could just easily go buy another one of. Easily.
Yeah.
Could have, but it would have, cut into the budget for something else.
Yeah.
And so I just remember being asleep, and I think my mom had told him Nathan lost his belt. And so he burst in the room. I'd already been asleep, I think maybe for an hour, a couple hours. And just, I remember, again, it's not a shame thing. It's just kind of the way that just things were. He yanked me out of the bed and get up, rip all the covers up. And it was just kind of like the way that he would handle that little boy. It was just like, dude, what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
Why are you acting this way towards a child? Like, but it was just, and it wasn't like, again, there was never any like, your typical physical abuse to that degree. But again, it was like when he was mad, the way he was disciplined, it was over. Yeah. It was a little overboard. It was a little overkill. The way that he would handle being upset over the littlest things, it felt overkill. And like I said, it was just like when dad was home, it just wasn't a good time.
So I would have a question for you.
Yeah.
How did that, like, once you came to the Lord, because you came to the Lord when you were what, 16?
Yeah, I was like 15, 16 when I
How did that like shape your view of God? Or did it not?
I always knew that God was good.
You didn't associate that aspect of like father to God.
I almost, because for me it was like even though I had a stepdad, I always, growing up, I became more and more aware that my real dad was out there somewhere. Didn't want anything to do with me. Otherwise he would have come and knocked, and he would have, sought relationship. And I knew he had kids because my mom has told me that whenever she brought me to their house when I was a baby, for them to meet me, for the whole family to meet me, that she knocked on the door of where he was living at the time, and that there was a woman who was pregnant who answered the door. She had a little girl already, I don't think that little girl is his, but the baby was his. And so so shortly after my mom gave birth to me, she goes and shows, introduces me to my dad, my biological dad, and he's living with a woman who's pregnant, and so that's my half brother. They live somewhere in Mexico, I believe Juarez, and so, as I was growing up, I became more and more aware of the fact that my biological dad is somewhere out there, and my at-home life with my stepdad sucks.
Mm-hmm.
When he's gone, my life is great.
Yeah.
Me and my mom are great. My life with my sisters, because my stepdad and my mom, they had 2 little girls, and it's great. When he's not home, things are great.
So that didn't do
it didn't affect my imagery of God per se. My stepdad, I want to say that the absence of my real father, it was hard for me to perceive God. I had a good perception of Jesus, I would say, because my mom would always talk about how much Jesus loves us. But I didn't really know how to perceive God the Father. And what the church taught me was that God the Father was angry and that he hated humanity. He got to the point where he wanted to basically, he was done with us. But that Jesus comes in and, no, I'll offer myself as a sacrifice to appease and be the blood sacrifice and, to an angry God. And that God was like, okay, fine. Yeah. It's like, and so I was just kind of, I learned about God through the church. It wasn't so much that my stepdad caused me to have a bad imagery of the Father. I didn't know what to think about the Father.
Yeah.
Until I, got taught certain doctrines in church. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I mean, that's the way that it kind of affected.
Didn't really affect it at all?
Not so much, no.
Yeah. But I know that for you had someone come in, a father figure come into your life.
Mm-hmm. So I remember recently, there was a quote, I want to say it was like Jordan Peterson or something like that. And he was saying, like, he was talking about just kids who grow up fatherless or grow up with, bad examples of dads, poor examples of dads, right? He was saying that a lot of times what ends up happening is we start looking for father figures in other people. Mm-hmm. And with that, a lot of times in, your lower income neighborhoods and stuff like that becomes gangs and, just wrong crowds, right? For me, I knew that I wanted to have a relationship with God, but there was several years, handfuls of teenage years that I didn't really care to, because I grew up in a very religious household, like uber religious, and I'm very much a why kind of person. I want to know why we believe certain things, especially if they're limiting. Yeah. And teenagers are very limited, right? Yes. And so, and for me, I always wanted to know why. And my mom would always try to give me her best answers, but her answers never satisfied me, because she just, she only knew what she knew. Mm-hmm. It's
all of us.
Yeah, it's all of us, right? But I'm saying, like, we went to ministry school to, like, study this stuff out and do, she did none of that. She just loved Jesus passionately. And so she just taught me the things that were taught to her, and, and so, and sometimes we have religious answers that aren't very well studied.
Foundation.
That's just more cultural or, what's the term I'm looking for? It's like traditional. You have a lot of traditions in the church that get passed down as rule, as law. This is what the Bible says. No, that's not what the Bible says.
Yeah,
that's the way you're not interpreting that correctly. Yeah, And so anyway, I didn't want a relationship with the Lord for a while, and but at the same time, I was scared to say no to I don't want to, I don't want God.
Yeah.
Half of my friends were like atheist or agnostic or whatever. The other ones just didn't really care.
Yeah.
And so that's where I was at. And I remember there was one time my mom was like, she realized where I was at, and I was like being defiant and all that stuff, right? Typical teenager stuff. And she was like, if you don't want anything to do with the word, I'm going to take all the scriptures off of your wall, blah, blah, blah. Because she used to write scriptures on little postcards and post them everywhere. I say used to.
I was
still
say,
to this
still
day.
Does. What are you talking about?
All over the house.
Every door frame.
And with some olive oil.
Hey, it's blessed.
And she was like, fine, that's fine. Give me your Bibles. Give me all your Bibles. I'll take all the stuff out of this room having to do with God. I remember that scared me. I was like, well, I mean, I don't know that I want anything to do with God, like having to like follow God, but at the same time, like, what?
Don't take that away from me.
I'm not gonna say that I don't want God. Like I might get smitten. I might get freaking cancer. Like what? You know what I'm saying? Like
you had a really good view of God.
Yeah, I was scared. You know, I think so. Then maybe it did kind of affect the way that I viewed God. Kind of having just looking at Him more fearful than anything.
Yeah.
But yeah. So going back to the father figure thing, there was a part of me that still really genuinely wanted to know the Jesus that my mom would tell me about. And so anyway, we moved back to El Paso. We lived in a small little town for a handful of years. And when we moved back to El Paso, I ended up going to a church, youth ministry that my cousins went to. And it was like all these hardcore kids and stuff. And I was like, oh, these are my people.
I was going to say, your cup of tea.
Yeah. And so, and like the kind of music they played, the worship that they did, it wasn't like your typical Sunday church worship. It was like, it was intense. It was different.
Took you into the throne room.
It was just different.
Yeah.
And I just remember being like, if I'm going to serve God, I want to do it here. And there was something about the man that was preaching, and his name is Josh Brown, and the way that he would just like explain the word made it come to life in a way that I just never heard before.
Yeah.
My mom preached to me the word my whole life, and we went to church after church after church, just and so I found a father figure in my youth pastor. Yeah. And to this day, he's still my pastor. Now I have a different church here in Dallas, and I remember there was should I go into?
Yeah, I think you definitely should.
I remember we were at a youth conference in Dallas. We took a couple vans, and we loaded the vans up, a bunch of teenagers, and we drove to Dallas for a youth conference called Youth for the Nations, YFN. And it's 2008, and that's when my life shifted. Yeah. I dealt with so much insecurity about just various things, and again, my relationship with my stepdad it was horrible. I thought I hated the man. We did not get along. We did not have a good relationship. I was under the assumption he didn't like me, I didn't like him. He pretended, I felt that he pretended to make the effort because, that's the thing to do as a dad. But my perspective as a teenager was, we don't like each other, and that's just the way things are. Yeah. On Father's Day, I'd write out a nice Father's Day card because that's what you do. Yeah. But I remember writing those Father's Day cards. It's like, I love you, I thank you for. And I was just like, I don't mean this. Like, I don't love him. Yeah. I am appreciative of the fact that he, has provided a house for us, and and takes care of my mom and my sisters, and he takes care of me, like, financially. But I needed more than that. I didn't need someone necessarily to provide financially, although that is a need, obviously, but it's like, but what did I need? And I felt like, for me, it was connection. It was fatherhood. It was someone that I could open up to. And, as a teenager, I'm not opening up to my mom in the same way anymore as I was as a child, Yeah. And so, so we're at YFN, this youth conference, and Jesus Culture was there, and Banning Liebscher, director of Jesus Culture, he's speaking on fatherlessness and just father issues and this and that. And during the altar call, he says something about I feel like the Lord is wanting to do some healing for teenagers who don't feel loved by their fathers, have bad relationships with their fathers, and this and that. And he was saying the exact, like, he was like speaking,
Reading your mail.
Yeah, reading my mail. Like he was reading into the depths of my heart that I hadn't really even ever like processed concerning my dad. And I remember he's saying that, and I'm just like immediately just waterworks. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is I never really like had an altar call kind of be directly for me. And I thought I was going to be one of the only people to respond to that altar call because it was so specific. How could so many people deal with something similar? And I remember just hundreds. I want to say it was like close to 1,000 kids that 1 week of the youth conference. And I mean, hundreds of them standing up just in just brokenness and realizing I'm not alone in this. There's so many, kids that don't feel loved by their father. And he calls all the youth pastors up to the front to basically as proxy, as, stand-in dads. Yeah. And calls all the youth pastors up to the front, and he basically says, as a prophetic, symbol, I want you guys to run to one of these youth pastors. Just run to them. Anyone, doesn't matter, just find one and run to them and just embrace them and take that as the Father's embrace and just allow it to heal the depths.
I'm undone.
And dude, I'm bawling my eyes out. Like I've never, like at that point, I don't think I'd ever like had someone just like rip open the curtains of my soul and like point it out, and like, this is, deal with that. Because I hadn't really even processed it on my own.
Yeah. And
I go up, I'm kind of in the back, so I'm kind of last pickings kind of thing. All the youth pastors are kind of already taken, and I'm getting closer to the front, moving my way through the people, and I'm looking around, and all these youth pastors are they're already embracing, these random kids, but in the middle of it, the one youth pastor who was available was my youth pastor, Josh Brown, and I had already seen him as a father figure and kind of helped.
Sorry, I'm making you cry.
It's not you. And it was just one of the main reasons why I've always seen him as a father, right? As a father figure. And I call him Papa. It's kind of my nickname for him. He calls me Mijo. Yeah. And he's a white man, calling me Mijo. Mijo. And that's what El Paso will do to you, And so I just remember it being just so like confirming that I found the right pastor, and I finally found the right ministry that, was gonna, help my walk with the Lord be what it needed to be. And that entire time that I didn't necessarily want God or whatever, like the Lord was pursuing me, and that's partially why I feel like I was never able to just like say no officially to God, because I'm a genuine believer that every one of us is loved by God. Every single one of us, throw Calvinist doctrine out the window about predestination and only some of us are, no, dude, that's a bunch of trash. Every single one of us is loved by Jesus. Yeah. And he's wooing every single one of us. Sometimes we, in our hardness, don't know it. Yeah. We're not looking that way. We're ignoring it. Yeah. But in different seasons, you'll notice, if you just like open yourself up to it, you'll notice that he's been there the whole time. He's calling you to it. He's not going to let you go, and so I found a father figure in Josh, and it was like, the Lord led me to the right ministry, right ministry for me, the right ministry, the right pastor that was going to be what I needed, that I wasn't necessarily getting at home,
Yeah.
So.
Where do you think that you've found the most healing from that father wound?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that, I'm still, as you can tell, like I'm still unraveling it in different seasons. Certain seasons will provide certain healing in that issue. And then other seasons, as I'm a dad, and so different seasons will reveal new parts of that wound.
Yeah.
And but I'd say that the different ways I have found healing thus far is first and foremost with my biological dad not being a part of the picture, and feeling for a while, feeling like he doesn't want anything to do with me, obviously. That's just kind of the way I've always perceived it. Like, otherwise, especially as a dad now, like, I'm like, dude, how do you have a kid? How can you have a whole child that is your child and just not want anything to do with that relationship?
Yeah.
Like, even if you don't feel a certain way for the partner anymore, like, that's fine. You don't have to, steward that anymore, but you have a whole child that's part of you.
Yeah.
And so just anyway, going back to your question, like, the first thing that I would say, like, the Lord has kind of healed in me is revealing to me that he is a father to the fatherless.
Yeah. It's funny actually that you said that, because I had just read that right before Psalm 68.
Yeah.
Father to the fatherless.
And let that be enough.
Yeah.
That if your absent father never comes around,
or never asks for forgiveness,
right, anything like that, that it's okay. He brings the justice in being the perfect father for you.
Because even if you have a good father here on earth, you're still gonna have hurt.
Yeah, you're gonna have
human.
exactly.
And so, like, it doesn't matter if you have the most perfect father here on earth. You can still apply that.
100%. And then I would say, just over the years since that first time that I kind of had that realization, it's just in seeing my stepdad over the years kind of apologize for things, and the way that he did things, and the way that he handled his issues, or didn't handle them, right? Having the apology was always helpful. It's not needed, but we feel that we need it.
Yeah.
But it is helpful when it happens, and then, which he has many times.
Yeah.
And more than that, just seeing him be a grandfather to my little girls.
Yeah.
They're not his blood.
That's true. Man, I didn't think about that. That's so true.
But he's a great grandfather.
He's an amazing, like, literally, hold on. We got the mosquito eaters
the
up in our house.
The freaking skater eaters.
So,
get
welcome to Texas.
Go
y'all.
on, get.
If it comes back in my head, you better swat it. 'Cause I don't like those things. Anyways, so, like, Bella, because I stay home with the girls, she'll always, like, we'll call Grammy all the time, because sometimes your dad is at work.
Yeah.
But if Grampy's home, oh, man, Bella is on cloud 9.
Yeah,
She's
she
like,
loves him.
Where's Grampy?
Yeah.
Is Grampy home right now?
Yeah. And it's just
the
really,
love that they have is so sweet.
yeah, it's really healing to see the way that he loves her.
Yeah.
And I don't know this for sure, but upon knowing who he is, and knowing how things were with me, I think it's also healing for him.
I agree.
To love her in a way that he probably wishes he loved me.
Yeah.
He always loved me, and I know he did.
Yeah.
But to love is not just a word. We know this. It's not just what we say, but it's an action. And, his love was hard to see, right? And so nowadays it's not. I see the way he loves
Bella.
my little girls.
Addie, too. Addie just doesn't talk yet, so.
Yeah. And that's been really healing.
Good.
So, and what about you? Father wounds, and just
Yeah, I'll tell my story briefly.
Yeah.
Because it's not always fully mine to tell, but
Sorry I took so much time.
do not apologize. So I grew up, both parents, typical American home. When I was 10, my dad had a manic episode. He got diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and I was there for all of it. It happened at Christmas when I was 10 in 5th grade. And so we were with family, and we were in Missouri, so we had to drive back home. But my brother stayed with my uncle, and I had to come home because I was a competitive dancer, and I had dance classes, so that I literally couldn't miss because I had a competition coming up. So I came home with my parents, and we got home, and my dad was so manic. He didn't sleep for days. He was very...
something was happening at work or whatever, and it was just kind of triggering.
He got triggered. And that's how it works. When you're bipolar, you get triggered. And my grandmother, his mom, was bipolar. So, like, we understood that it was a possibility, but my dad was a very, like, mild-tempered man.
So we got schizophrenia on both sides of the family, girl.
I know, but we broke that off right here.
Yeah, we did.
So, my dad was very, very manic those few days, but the way that it works in Texas is if you you can't just say like, hey, my husband's being manic, he needs to go to a mental hospital. They have to physically hurt someone, because I'm sure there's been somebody in the history of the world that has abused that,
right?
And I could just say like, oh, Nate's getting on my nerves today, send him to a mental hospital.
Some mad spouse call on, hey, they're crazy.
So, but my dad was very threatening. Like, there were lots of times we were cussed out. My mom obviously got the brunt of it, but I was there to witness it all. And it was really hard for me because I'd been a daddy's girl.
How old were you?
I was 10. I just turned 10 2 months before. And so just to see my dad like that was just like heartbreaking. And I remember one of the days he was just like, you're conniving behind my back to me and my mom, because we were on the phone with my aunt. My mom was just trying to get him help. And he just cussed us out. And I remember like being heartbroken when that happened. And I don't remember a lot from back then. And if I'm going to be honest, I don't really want to. The Lord has started, Nate knows this, but the Lord has started to bring some of it up. And I'm like, I wish you wouldn't. Like, I wish you would just leave it there, dead and gone. But
things that it's actually subconsciously
things that I have almost like projected on the Lord because of, things that happened with my father. Sure. So my dad did eventually get help. He went to a mental hospital and got help. But in Texas, you can sign yourself out. Again, I'm sure somebody someday was like put in this mental hospital, and the person in charge of them never signed him out, right? Like, probably Britney Spears is a great example.
That's hilarious.
So,
oh my God.
My dad could just sign himself out.
Britney Spears.
So my dad could just sign himself out.
Leave Britney alone.
I mean, I'm like supporting her sort of in this
scenario.
Just trying to say
today, Junior.
Sorry. So, anyways, he signed himself out before his meds were normal. So they just drugged that boy up because they said, you're a flight risk, bro. So they just drugged him up. And it took 2 years for his meds to be normal. Well, that time I'm 13. Those are like very formative years for a girl, especially. And so by the time my dad was back to normal, I had just gotten so used to like not living life with my dad, really. We all just kind of had to take care of him and make sure he was okay, mainly my mom. But it was really hard for me, especially, like I said, I was a daddy's girl. So then to have my dad just be completely different. And then you have to walk on eggshells because when someone's bipolar, you just never know when they're
what's going to
trigger them. And so it was really hard for me. I lived my life. Already I'm a perfectionist by default. And so I was just living my life walking on eggshells, terrified I was going to make him upset. And I didn't really know the Lord when I was that age. I went to church when I was younger and then didn't really grow up in church. I still would have said I was a Christian, but I did not know the Lord. Like, I didn't have a relationship with him. And I got saved when I was 17. And it was almost immediate once I got saved. The Lord was like, we are working on this wound that you have. And I remembered, like, a few times I would be like crying, forgiving my dad, but then I would still like go out and be rude to him, right? Like, he would be like, hey, do you want to go to the grocery store with me? No. Like, I didn't want to be anywhere near him. And like you said, you thought you hated your dad. Same. Like, I thought I had hatred towards my father. And one day I was praying for him and I really felt the Lord tell me, like, this is an illness. If your dad had cancer, would you view him like this? And I was like, no, like, I wouldn't. It's cancer. He couldn't help that. Same with my dad. Like, my dad, once he went manic that one time, he did everything he could to make sure he didn't go manic again.
Right. I think, but more, and without going into details, like, it wasn't so much that, it wasn't just that he went manic. There were things that happened that I think that you had also found out just about their past. And so it was just a culmination of a lot of things that made you feel the way you did about him.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
And so it was just hard. When I came to the Lord, I definitely still viewed him like and loved him and saw him as good, but it was almost like I never associated him as father because it was very much walking on eggshells. And I remember years later, I asked you the question, like, did it affect your view of God? Well, for me, 100% did, because like, I was just waiting for me to do something wrong and God just be like blowing up at me. And I remember one day I felt the Lord tell me, Brooke, I'm not bipolar. I'm not a bipolar God.
Sheesh.
And once he said that, I was like, that's true. Your word says you don't change. So do I believe that or do I not? And I was allowing how my father had been to portray how I viewed God or be how I viewed God. And so for me, it's been a lot of unlearning and relearning who God is, because I came into my relationship with him with such a preconceived notion of what a father was. And I felt like, I couldn't trust God fully because it was scary, right? I had to walk on eggshells with God. And the Lord has really shown me, like, man is man. We sin, right? So I can't project my father onto the father, right? That's not fair on my dad either. Like, none of us are perfect. No. And every mistake my dad has ever made, he's owned up to and asked for forgiveness and hasn't done it again. And like has taken steps so that, he doesn't go manic again or whatever.
Sure.
And I would say the same with me. Like, it's been so healing to see him as a grandfather.
He's a fantastic grandfather.
Listen, Bella doesn't even care about me when Papa's around. Which, yes, we call him Papa. Like,
so he's Papa, and then my stepdad is Grampy.
So she is obsessed with Papa. Like, today, you weren't around, Nate. You were at the church, and that sounds terrible. You weren't around. You were at the church working.
You weren't
and
here.
She was like, Mama, where's Papa? Can we call Papa? I miss Papa. I want to see Papa. Like, and it's just so sweet to just see them, how much they love each other. And, every time pretty much we go to my dad's house, we go, or to my parents' house, they're still together. We go up to the park. And my dad used to always take me to the park. So when we go all together, it's very like seeing him be a good grandfather. There are snippets of memories of like, I remember he did that for me. Whereas I thought that he was just like, he did nothing and he didn't care and he didn't try and he did. And the Lord has really shown me grace too.
Yeah, that's so good.
I look at my life and I see how many times I mess up with Bella, how I scream at her, or I don't really scream at her. Let's be honest in this podcast. I don't really scream at her that much, but I'll get frustrated at her and I'll a little bit lose my temper. Yeah. Bella, why did you do that?
Yeah,
Why'd you hit your sister on the top of the head?
Yeah.
Who's not even one? And
who looks two, but she's not even one.
Who could probably beat you up because she weighs like 5 pounds less than you. But
I love her.
I know we have the best kids. But for me, I think of myself and I think of all the times that Bella could look at me and be like, man, my mom does not look like Jesus. Or like, you know, and I want grace. As she gets older, I want her to be able to give me grace. And it's not like oh, I just don't want to be perceived as bad. It's just like, man, because I know the grace of the Father, like I want to be able to extend that. And I want my kids to know the grace of the Father, which they will. They already are, knowing God and knowing Jesus and being raised in a home where that's very common. And like, I want to be able to have my daughters extend that same sort of grace to us when we mess up, because we inevitably will, because we're human.
Yep. 100%. I remember having to go through that same, process with forgiving my stepdad for just, how things were. And getting to that place is not easy.
It's
getting to
really
that place
hard.
But it requires, like, if you're in that spot where it's just hard for you to come to that place where you forgive your father, number one, you can't do it on your own. It's going to require you coming to Jesus and allowing Jesus to do it in you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And there's this thing that people love to say, and it's, oh, I'll forgive them, but I won't forget. And I've even heard a lot of Christians come in and like support that line. Mm-hmm. Oh, well, of course, you can forgive someone, but yeah, it's healthy. Like you're not going to forget what they do, because then, they're just going to do it all over again. Like, you can't forget. But that's not the point. Isn't that, you should forget what they did, right? Whenever we say like, oh, that's not real forgiveness. If you're saying, oh, I'm going to forgive but not forget, the Christian answer is like, well, that's not real forgiveness. At least that's the way the church talks about it. And then again, like, what I'm saying is that I've heard a lot of Christians coming in and maybe like, no, like, you can't, you
have to,
you can't forget what they did. Otherwise they'll just do it again. But it's the heart behind that statement that says, oh, I'll forgive, but I won't forget. Like, that is the wrong. You're not coming to the table with the right heart of forgiveness. It's a tainted forgiveness. When you're willing to say, when you're coming to the table saying, I'll forgive this, but that's not true forgiveness.
Yeah. True
forgiveness is obviously we're human. We're going to remember what happened.
Yeah.
And as a shield of sorts to prevent that trauma from happening again for what someone did, that's built into us innately. We're not going to forget what happened, but we don't have to come to the table of forgiveness with that statement.
Yeah.
I'm going to forgive, but I'm not going to forget.
Yeah.
Like, that's not real forgiveness. Real forgiveness is being willing to forget.
Well, or willing when you remember to forgive again.
Right.
And I think that's been, for me, a big story of how I have been able to forgive my dad, because even if you never talk to them again, you're going to think about it. But if you're in a relationship with these people,
100%.
they're going to hurt you again.
Sure.
And you're going to have to be able to forgive them when you remember the things that they've done.
Exactly.
Or if the enemy brings that back into your mind, like, oh, look at XYZ of the things that they did.
Right. Well, it's because scripture talks to us about how the Lord remembers our sin no more.
Yeah.
He is our model. He is what we're aspiring to look like and walk like. And if we want to forgive the way Jesus forgives, obviously we can't forgive sin, right? But like, forgive what people have done to us. If we want to forgive like that, it requires the willingness to forget what happened. You're not going to forget. And it's not saying, hey, out of like in an abusive way, you should forget what they did, otherwise you haven't really forgiven them. No, and we're not saying you should just forget. It's the heart behind it, saying I am willing to forgive you, and that's something that's led by Jesus, not by you. Like, you need help to forgive truly, and then it's that heart that's willing to say.
Yeah, I think less on forget, more on I won't hold this against you.
That's the point. That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah. I didn't have the right verbiage for it.
There you go. I got you, baby.
Thank you, baby.
Wow.
We're a team.
For once in my life, I got it right. But yeah, thanks, babe, for opening up. I know this one was hard for you.
Yeah.
But I know that it's going to bring some people some healing.
It's a process.
It's definitely a process.
I realized at one point, oh yeah, I've forgiven my biological dad. And oh yeah, I've forgiven my stepdad. I even called him up one day and told him, it was after that youth camp. I called him up that night and I told him that I forgave him for a lot of the things that happened. And just kind of the way things were. And I thought I was done. And then years later, just different things that we go through in life will reveal, new things that we have to forgive and let go. Yeah. And so it's a process. But I'm hoping that, my process and your process brings some kind of solace, brings some kind of direction to people as they deal with similar situations. Yeah. So, love you.
Love you.
Good stuff. I appreciate y'all staying with us this whole time, just over an hour. But really excited that we have y'all listening, even been willing to listen. And we're excited to have you guys listen to some of the episodes we got coming up. So stay tuned for that. Be on the lookout. We got some more heavy hitters coming up too. So
not so much heavy, but hitters.
Yeah, we got some heavy ones. We got some cool ones. We got some good ones.
We'll see.
We'll see. Later, y'all.